Our dreams never came true. These men helped to build the Qatar's World Cup. Now they are struggling to survive. CNN. Kamal was standing outside the shop with the other migrant workers, having finished yet another grueling working day, when he says a few others were arrested this August. Without explanation, the 24-year-old says he was put into a vehicle and for the next week kept in the Qatari jail, the location and the name of which he does not know. When they arrested me, I couldn't say anything, not a single word, as I was so scared, he told the CNN Sport, speaking at home in southern Nepal, where he was been working on a farm since being deported 3 months ago. Kamal CNN has changed the names of the Nepali workers to protect them from retaliation. He is one of the many migrant workers wanting to tell the world of their experiences in Qatar, a country that will this month host one of the sport's greatest, most lucrative spectacles, the World Cups, the tournament which usually united the world as millions watch the spectacular goals and carefully choreographed celebrations. It will be a history event, the first World Cup to be held in the Middle East, but one also mired in controversy. Much of the build-up to this tournament has been on more sober matters, that of human rights, from the deaths of migrant workers and the conditions many have endured in Qatar, to LGBTQ and women's rights. Kamal says he has yet to be paid the 7,000 Qatari riyal bonus, around the $1,922. He says he's entitled to from his previous employers no 7,000 riyal in insurance for injuring two fingers at work. I wasn't told why I was being arrested. People are just standing there. Some are walking walking with their grocery. Some are just sitting there consuming tobacco products. They just arrest you, he added, before explaining he could not ask questions as he does not speak Arabic. A worker is seen inside the Rusail Stadium during a stadium tour on December 20, 2019 in Doha, Qatar. Describing the conditions in the cell he shared with 24 other Nepali migrant workers, he says he was provided with a blanket and a pillow, but the mattress on the floor he had to sleep on was riddled with bed bugs. Inside the jail, there were people from Sri Lanka, Kerala, India, Pakistan, Sudan, Nepal, African, Philippines. There were around 14, 15 units in one jail. They were around 250 to 300 people, around 24 to 25 people per room, he says. When they take you to the jail, they don't give you a room right away. They keep you in the veranda. After a day or two, once the room is empty, they keep people from one country in one room. Using a smuggled phone, he spoke to friends, one of whom he says brought his belongings, including his passport, to the jail. Through though he says he was sent to home after the Nepali embassy had sent a paper copy of his passport to the jail. Sienna has reached out to the embassy but has yet to receive the response. When they put me on the flight, I started thinking, why are they sending workers back all of the sudden? It's not one to 10 people. They are sending 150, 200, 300 workers on one flight, he says. Some workers who were just roaming outside wearing worker dress or sent back. They don't even allow you to collect your clothes. They just send you back in the clothes you are wearing. Kamal believes he was arrested because he had a second job, which is illegal under Qatar's 2004 labor law and allows authorities to cancel a worker's work permit. He says he worked the extra 2 to 4 hours a day to supplement his income, as he was not making enough money working 6 8 hour days a week. 6 8 hours days a week. Qatar has a 90-day grace period in which a worker can remain in the country legally without another sponsor. But if they have not had their permit renewed or reactivated in that time, they risk being arrested or deported for being undocumented. They says He says he received the paperwork upon his arrest, which Amnesty International says would likely have explained why he was being detained. But as he was Arabic, did not know what he said, and no translator was provided. Labels rest in green space along the Corniche in Doha, Qatar on June 23. A Qatari government official told CNN in a statement any claims that workers are being jailed or deported without explanation are untrue. Action is only taken in very specific cases, such as if the individual participates in violence. The official added that 97% of all eligible workers were covered by Qatar's wage protection system, established in 2018, which ensures wages are paid in full and on time. Further work was being done to strengthen the system, the official said. Some workers never returned home. With the opening match just days away, on the pitch matters are a mere footnote because this tournament has come at a cost to workers who left their families in the belief that they would reap a financial reward in one of the world's richest countries per capita. Some would never return home. None of the three Nepali workers CNN spoke were richer for their experience. Indeed, they're in depth and full of melancholy. The Guardian reported last year that 6,500 South Asian migrant workers have died in Qatar since the country was awarded the World Cup in 2010, most of whom were involved in low wage, dangerous labor often undertaken in extreme heat. The report did not connect all 6,500 deaths with the World Cup infrastructure project and has not been independently verified by CNN. Hassan Hassan al Tawadi, the man in charge of leading Qatar's preparations, told CNN's Becky Anderson that the Guardian's 6,500 figure was a sensational headline that was misleading and that the report lacked context. The government official told CNN there have been three work related deaths on stadiums and 67 non work related deaths. In a statement, the official said the Guardian's figures were inaccurate and widely misleading. The 6,500 figure takes the number of all foreign worker deaths in the country over a 10-year period and attributed it to the World Cup. The official said this is not true and neglects all other causes of deaths, including illness, old age, and traffic accidents. It also fails to recognize that only 20% of foreign workers in Qatar are employed on construction sites. It has been widely reported that Qatar has spent $220 billion leading up to the tournament, which would make it the most expensive World Cup in history, though This likely includes infrastructure not directly associated with the stadium construction. A spokesperson for the Spring Committee for Delivery and Legacy, which since its formation in 2011 has been responsible for overseeing the infrastructure project and planning for the World Cup, told CNN that the tournament budget was $6.5 billion without expanding on what that cost covered. Eight new stadiums rose from the desert, and the Gulf state expanded each airport, constructed new hotels, rail, and highways. All would have been constructed by migrant workers who, according to Amnesty International, account for 90% of workplace in a near 3 million population. An aerial view of IAI Janub Stadium at sunrise on June 21 in Al Kharaa, Qatar. Since 2010, migrant workers have faced delayed or unpaid wages, forced labor, long hours in hot weather, employer intimidation, and the inability to leave their jobs because of the country's sponsorship system, human rights organizations have found. However, the health, the safety, and dignity of all workers employed on our project has remained steadfast. The statement from the SC read: our efforts have resulted in significant improvement in accommodation standards, health and safety regulations, grievance mechanisms, healthcare provision, and the reimbursement of illegal recruitment fees to workers. While the journey is ongoing, we are committed to delivering the legacy we promised. The legacy that improves the lives and lays the foundation for fair, sustainable, and lasting labor reforms. Last year, in an interview with CNN Sport anchor Amanda Davis, FIFA President Gianni Infantino said that while more needs to be done, progress has been made. I haven't seen great evolution that has happened in Qatar, which was recognized, I mean, not by FIFA, but by labor unions around the world, by international organizations, said Infantino. It was difficult to breathe. We are unusually writing about the World Cup in November because the competition had to be moved from its usual June July slot to Qatar's winter as the heat is extreme in the country's summer months. Temperatures can reach around 43 degrees Celsius, 109 degrees Fahrenheit in June. That placing that playing in such conditions could have posed a health risk to players. Hari is 27 years old and, like many of his compatriots, left Nepal for Qatar. As his family, he was one of the five siblings, with just his father at home, desperately, desperately needed money, primarily to eat. Since 2013, Nepal's government mandated a minimum wage has been set at 74 dollars a month, according to minimumwage.org. He says that his monthly wage in Qatar was 700 riyal a month, $192. After moving to Qatar in 2014, he worked in four places during 4 year stay at a supermarket, a hotel, and airport. But the most difficult job, he says, was in construction when he had to carry ties up buildings 6 to 7 stories above in overbearing heat, plus lay pipelines in deep pit. It was too hot, he tells CNN. The foreman was very demanding and used to complain a lot. The foreman used to threaten to reduce our salaries and overtime pay. I had to carry tires on my shoulder to the top. It was very difficult going up through the scaffolding. In the pipeline work, there were 5 to 7 meters deep feet. We had to lay the stones and concrete. It was difficult due to the heat. It was difficult to breathe. We had no come upstairs using a ladder to drink water. It never happened to me. But I saw some workers fainting at work. I saw one Bengali, one Nepali, two, 3 people faint while walking. They working. They took the Bengali to medical services. I'm not sure what happened to him. During his time in Qatar, government regulations generally prohibited workers from working outdoors between 11:30 a.m. and 3 p.m. from June 15 to August 31st. He said one company had he worked for followed these rules. He said at some places they didn't have water. Some places they didn't provide us water on time. At some places we used to go to houses nearby asking for water. In this photo taken in May 2015 during a government organized media tour, workers used heavy machinery at the Acharya Stadium being built for the 2022 World Cup. Working long hours in extreme heat has some non-governmental organizations believe caused a number of deaths and put lives at risk in Qatar. In 2019, research published in the Cardiology Journal exploring the relationship between the deaths of more than 1,300 Nepali workers between 2009 and 2017 and the heat exposure found a strong correlation between heat stress and your workers dying of cardiovascular problems in the summer months. The government official told CNN that there had been a constant decline in the mortality rate of migrant workers, including a decline in heat stress disorders, thanks in large part to our comprehensive heat stress registration. Qatar has always acknowledged that work remains to be done, notably to hold unscrupulous employers to account, the government official added. System reform does not happen overnight, and shifting a behavior of every company takes the time, as is the case with any country around the world. Heat does not typically injure on its own. Natasha Iskander, professor of urban planning and public service at New York University, tells CNN that heat can kill in ways that are confusing and unclear. Petal, petal heat stroke can look like a heart attack or seizure. Sometimes the heat kills through the body, implying manageable and often silent conditions like diabetes and hypertension and turning them into sudden killers, he explains. As a result, Qatar in the death certificate that it has issued after migrant construction workers have collapsed has been away has been able to push back against the correct correlation between heat stress and deaths and claim instead that the deaths are due to the natural causes, even though the more proximate cause is work in the heat. Determining the number of workers injured by the heat is even harder, she says, because many injured may not become apparent until years later, when migrants have returned home and young men found that their kidney no longer functioned, that they suffered from chronic kidney disease, or that their heart have begun to fail, displaying levels of cardiac weakness that are debilitating. Heat does not typically injure on its own, she added, as workers are exposed to heat and heat dangers through the labor relations in Qatari work site. The long hours of physically intense work, the forces of overtime, the abusive conditions, the bullying on site all shape how exposed the workers are to heat. Additionally, conditions beyond the work site also augmented heat power to harm. Things like poor sleep, insufficient nutrient, or the room that was not cool enough to allow the body to reset after the day in the heat. In Qatar, the employer houses the workers in labor camps, and the workers, as a matter of policy, were segregated in industrial areas where living accommodations are terrible. Foreign laborers working on the construction site of the Al football stadium, one of Qatar's 2022 World Cup stadiums, walked back to their accommodation at the Isdan 40 compound after finishing work on May 4, 2015 in Doha's Al southern suburbs. According to Amnesty International, Qatari authorities have not investigated thousands of deaths of migrant workers over the past decade, despite evidence of a link between premature deaths and unsafe working conditions. That these deaths are not being recorded as work-related prevent families from receiving compensation, the advocacy group states. In its statement, the SC said that its commitment to publicly disclose non-work related deaths went beyond the requirement of the UK's Health and Safety Executive Reporting of Injuries, Diseases and Dangerous Occurrences regulations, which defines and provides a classification for how to document work-related and non-work-related incidents. The statement added the CSC investigates all non-work-related deaths and work-related fatalities in line with our incident investigation procedure to identify contributory factors and establish how they could have been prevented. This process involves the evidence collection and analysis and witness interviews to establish the fact of the incident. The Amnesty International Allah Knight told CNN Sports that her organization would continue to push Qatar to thoroughly investigate deaths of migrant workers, including past deaths, to ensure the families of the deceased have the opportunity to rebuild their lives. Barun Jimail is the human rights lawyer based in Kathmandu, whose work focused on the exploitation of Nepali migrants working abroad. He tells CNN the families he advocates for have not received satisfactory information on their loved ones' deaths. Families sent out healthy young family member to work and they received the news that the family member died when they are sleeping. He says in a separate interview, he told the CNN last year the Qatar World Cup is really the bloody cup, the blood of migrant workers. Last year, Qatari registration was strengthened regarding outdoor working conditions, expanding summertime working hours during which outdoor work is prohibited, replacing registration introduced in 2007, and additionally putting into the law that war work must stop if the wet bulb globe temperature ranges beyond 32.1 degrees Celsius, 89.8 Fahrenheit. In the particular workplace, the regulations also mandate all annual health checks for workers as well as mandatory risk assessment. We recognize that heat stress is a particular issue in the summer months in Qatar, a Qatari government official said. In May 2021, Qatar introduced the requirement for companies to conduct annual health checks for workers as well as mandatory risk assessment to mitigate dangers of heat stress. Companies are expected to adopt a flexible, self-monitor the working hours where possible, adjust shift rotations, enforce regular breaks, provide free cold drinking water and shady workspaces, and adhere to all other guidelines with respect to heat stress outlined by the Ministry of Labor. Every summer, Qatar's labor inspectors carry out thousands of unannounced visits to work sites across the country to ensure that heat stress rules are being followed. The official added, between June and September 2022, 382 work sites are ordered to close for violating the rules. Workers walk to the Lusail Stadium, one of the 2022 World Cup Qatar World Cup stadiums in Lusail in December 20, 2019. Iskander said a heat point of 32.1 degrees Celsius WBGT was already dangerous. Working at the physical intensity that construction workers do in Qatar for any amount of time at that temperature is damaging to the body, he explained. The regulation relied on the assumption that workers will be able to self-pace and rest as needed whenever they experience the heat stress. Anyone who has ever spent any amount of time on the Qatar construction site knows that workers have no ability to self-pace. Night as the factory investigation into migrant workers' deaths are often not happening precludes, precludes the possibility of greater protections being implemented because if you don't know what is really happening to these people, how can you then implement and enforce effective measures to increase their protection? For the majority of his name in Qatar, Hari said he felt sad. He would watch planes take off during his 6 months pending the airport gardens and questions why he was in the country. But he had paid 90,000 Nepali rupees, $685, to the Nepali recruitment company that facilitated his move. He was also told, he says, by the company he has joined that he would have had to pay 2,000 to 3,000 riyal, $549 to $823 to buy himself off his contract. His friends, he said, counseled him as he continued to walk lonely days. For Harry says, not enough money to live and save it for his family. Amnesty International says many migrants pay high fees to cross-porous recruitment agent in their home country, which make the workers scared to leave their jobs when they got to Qatar. Now he is a father of two and works in flowing fields in Nepal as the tractor driver. But Harry hopes to one day to walk over the game his heart to set on Malaysia. I don't want my children to go through what I did. I want to build my house, buy some land. That's what I'm thinking. But let's see what God has planned, he says. Our dream never came true. Sunit has been back in Nepal since August after working just 8 months in Qatar. He had expected to be there for 2 years, but the collapse of the construction company he worked for meant he and many others returned with money still owed to them. He said He struggles to find work in Nepal, meaning feeding his two children and paying school fees is difficult. He had dreamed of watching World Cup matches from the rooftop of the hotel he had helped build. One of the stadiums, the name of which he does not know, was a 10-minute walk from the hotel. I used to talk about it, he says of the World Cup, but we had to return and our dreams never came true. The stadium activities were visible from the hotel. We could see the stadium from the hotel rooftop in helping construct the city center hotel, the name of which he doesn't remember. He would carry bags of plaster, mix, and cement weighing from 30 to 50 kilos on his shoulders up to 10 to 12 floors, he says. The lift was rarely functional. Some people couldn't carry it and drop it halfway. If you don't finish your job, you were threatened, saying the salary would be deducted for that day, he says. The four men used to complain that we were taking water breaks as soon as we got to work. They used to threaten us, saying, "We will not pay you for the day." We said, "Go ahead, we are human. We need to drink water." It was very hot. It used to take 1.5 to 2 hours, 1.5 to 2 hours to get to the top. I used to get tired. I used to stop on the way, then proceed again slowly. Yes, the supervisors used to yell at us, but what could we do? He says he had paid an agent in Nepal 240,000 Nepali rupees, around $1,840 before leaving for Qatar. He says he has filed the case with the police about the agent, as he had been unable to fulfill for 2-year contract, but there have been no development. He says the owners of the company he worked for in Qatar were arrested because he did not pay laborers. The company did not immediately respond to CNN's request for comment, neither did it respond to questions from the business and the Human Rights Center, an advocacy group about protests over unpaid wages. Qatar has expanded its airport, con- constructed new hotels and rails and highways over the last decade. For a month, he says he was his accommodation with no work or money to buy food. He borrowed it. So he and his fellow workers called the police, who brought the food with them. The police came again after 10 to 15 days and said, "We have arrested the company people." The police distributed the food again. He says, "They told us the company has collapsed and the government will send all the workers back home. I'm extremely sad," he adds. "I mean, it is what it is. Nothing will change by regretting it. I got mad at the company, but what can I do? What can I do? Even if I had tried to fight back, it would have been my loss." The SEC said it has established what it claims is the first of its kind workers' welfare forum, which it said allowed the workers to elect the representative on their behalf, and when companies fails to comply with the WWF, it steps in, demands better, and alerts the authorities. Since 2016, the SEC said 69 constructors have been demobilized. 235 contractors placed placed on a watch list and a further 7 blacklisted. "We understand that there is always room for improvement," the statement added. Expertise and heroism. Qatar, a peninsula smaller than a continent, Connecticut, and the smallest World Cup host in history, is set to host an estimated 1.5 million fans over the month-long tournament, which begins in November 20. There are already reports of accommodation concerns for such a vast number of visitors. The spotlight is no doubt on this group state, as has progressively been the case since it was controversially awarded the tournament over the decades ago, though Qatari officials have previously strongly denied it to CNN the allegations of bribery which has surrounded each bid. Such attention has brought from reforms, significantly dismantling the kafala system, which gives the companies and private citizens control over migrant workers' employment and immigration status. In Qatar, migrant workers can now change jobs freely without permission from their employer. But not as another aspect of the kafala system, the criminal charge of absconding still exists, and this along with the other tools that are still available to employers means that fundamentally the power balance between workers and the employers in the imbalance remains great. The Knight says wages is still an issue at the wage protection system, lacks enforcement mechanisms, while she also says employers can cancel a worker's ID at a push of the button, meaning they risk arrest and deportation. Additionally, labor commit intended to help workers are under-resourced and lack the capacity to deal with the number of cases that are coming to them. The migrant laborers work at a construction site at the Spire Zone in Doha on March 26, 2016. Jimia agrees that there have been a few positive changes to employment laws, but as that it's more show and tell. Many workers who work in construction are untouched, so there is still exploitation going on, he tells CNN. Qatar's government officials told the CNN work remains to be done, but that systemic reform does not happen overnight, and shifting the behavior of every company takes time as it is the case with any country around the world. Over the last decade, Qatar has done more than any other country in the region to strengthen the right of foreign workers, and we will continue to work in close consultation with international partners to strengthen reforms and enforcement. Human Rights Watch's Pay Off FIFA campaign wants Qatar and the FIFA to pay at least $440 billion, an amount equal to the prize money being awarded at the World Cup to the families of migrant workers who have been harmed or killed in preparation for the tournament. The families of workers who have died face uncertain futures, HRW says, especially children. Those who survived and returned home cheated of wages or injured remain trapped in debt, in incest, with their consequences for their families. Jumire says compensation is key, but so too is making the world aware of what has taken place to make this tournament happen. People are concerned about closing brands and the meat they eat, but what about mega event? Isn't it time to isn't it time we ask how this works possible? He asked. Everyone who will watch should know at what cost this was even possible and how workers were treated. Players should know, sponsors should know. Would it be the same situation if it was European workers dying in Qatar. If it was Argentinian workers, would Argentina be concerned about playing? Because each migrant workers from poor South Asian countries, they are invisible people. Forced labor deaths of workers while making a World Cup is unacceptable. As a football fan, it makes me sad. As a lawyer, it makes me really disappointed. Only this month, Qatar's Labor Minister Ali bin Shamik Al Mari rejected the prospect of the remedy fund. A Qatar government official said the country's workers' support and insurance fund was effective in providing compensation for workers and their families, with the fund reimbursing workers with more than 350 million dollars so far this year. In terms of the SC's effort to ensure repayment of recruitment fees, as of the December 2021, workers have received $22.6 million dollars with the additional $5.7 million committed by contractors, according to FIFA. Last month, the FIFA's Deputy Secretary General Alasdair Bell said compensation is certainly something that we are interested in progressing. A general view shows the exterior of the Al Tumama Stadium in Doha, one of 8 stadiums that will host World Cup matches. It has been widely reported that FIFA has argued the nations participating in the World Cup to focus on the football when the tournament kicks off. FIFA committed to CNN that the letter signed by FIFA President Gianni Infantino and the governing body's Secretary General Fatima Samura was sent out on November 3 to the 2032 nations participating in the global showpiece, but will not divulge the content. However, a number of European federations have issued a joint statement saying they would campaign at the tournament on human rights and for a migrant workers center and the compensation fund for migrant workers. The motto for Qatar's bid team in 2010 was "Expect Amazing." In many ways, this year's World Cup has replicated that maxim. As New York University's Iskander says, one of the things that is not really covered in the coverage of the World Cup and the coverage of this enormous construction boom is the expertise and the heroism of the workers who built it. They built the buildings that are unimaginable to everyone, including the engineers and designers, until they are built. They performed acts of bravery that was unsung. They operated at levels of technical complexity and sophistications that are unparalleled, and yet their contribution to building the World Cup is really rarely featured, downplayed. They are represented, generally speaking, as exploited and oppressed, and it's true that they have been exploited and oppressed, but they are also the craftsmen that built this cup, and they are enormously proud of what they have built. Hosting this tournament has undoubtedly put Qatar under the global spotlight. The question is whether the world can enjoy watching what the migrant workers built, knowing the true cost of this $1 billion extravaganza.